the crux of this talk, and I'm trying to present everyone with what I call new biology. Historically, we've learned a lot of stuff over the last 50 or so years in medicine, and as evolution has occurred in the medical field, the pace of it has picked up tremendously in the last 10 years with the Genome Project and the explosion of literature in medical sciences. So what I'm going to try and do is give you a snippet of that. One problem I have is there's a lot of information to cover in a short period of time, so I'm from New York, I talk quick. I'm going to try and get as much information in as I can. I like starting all of my talks with a picture from Ansel Adams. I think he does some amazing work, and it sets the tone for how I feel. My disclosures. All medical talks, we need disclosures. I have none. All the money goes to my wife, and the only people who generally pay me is a few medical schools. Other than that, not really. Who can tell me what? Can you see that? Not so well. Those three little balls represent. Oxygen? Close, but almost. Ozone, correct. It's 3 oxygen molecules together in something called ozone. There was a speaker here a few months back called Dr. Peden. He's at UNC Chapel Hill, and he did a fantastic lecture on asthma and the ozone and pollutants. And so I'm going to follow up to his lecture. I don't know if anyone attended that, but this is sort of a thought process in how to take what he expounded upon and then make it into a more applicable scenario of how do we fix that problem. He presented more of the data. I'm going to talk more about how we can try and avoid these issues. The goal of this talk is to understand asthma and ozone. I'm going to try and help everyone understand basic immunity, understand how to protect ourselves, because I think that's a key part of this game. And I'm going to hopefully get everyone to understand food and bad alchemy. Food is a key player in almost every disease now in the world, and it is no exception that asthma and allergies are tremendously receptive to food changes. A mantra for this talk is, it is now clear that most of the cases of asthma originate in early life. Asthma is not a disease in general of time. It's a disease that starts right at the beginning and then it waits for the right trigger to turn it on. Oftentimes that trigger is occurring in the womb, or in the infancy stages. I want to present that data to you tonight because that's the crux of my problem and most physicians' problems is that if we can catch moms early on, we can stop a lot of this stuff. Big problem is we're not catching moms early on. Little aside, genes don't cause epidemics. They're not. Genes are purely blueprints for the development of the human host. It is the software that goes in that computer, that genome that is answering that question, and the software is what we're going to talk about, and it's what this place is all about. It's environmental signals, anything that is environmental. What is asthma? Simply stated, National Heart, Blood, and Lung Institute says asthma is a chronic inflammatory lung disease that obstructs and narrows the airways. Asthma causes recurring periods of wheezing, chest tightness, shortness of breath, and coughing. The coughing often occurs at night and early in the morning. It's a hallmark I teach all of my patients. If you're coughing at night, coughing in the morning, and you don't cough any other time, you need to worry that you have asthma or your asthma is out of control. 150 million people worldwide with asthma. That's a lot of people. Prevalence of asthma, right now we look at it's a prevalent disease. Obviously, the children are more likely to have it at 9.4%. It's more common in African Americans and also slightly more common in females. If you look at the map of the United States, you see pockets that have higher rates than others. And this is probably due to exposures to pollutants as well as exposures to poor quality food and many other things we'll talk about. Picture of asthma. Historically, when I was in medical school, we were taught that asthma is obstructive lung disease. It's purely a function of mucus getting in the way. You see this mucus here obstructs the ability to get air out. You get air in just fine. Air fills up, you can't get the air back out, and you get the little wheeze sound that comes with that. That's a whistling sound that goes across the airways. When that airway is open, you don't have that problem. Muscles are also involved with this airway constriction. The medicine we use called albuterol, the main focus of it is to take these little muscles and relax them so you can breathe again. But it does nothing to take care of the root problem, which is the inflammation. That's what we're going to spend most of the time talking about tonight, other than the genetics. Environment. You name me a disease, I'll tell you the environment is a trigger to turn it on. Other than simple genetic issues like trisomy 21, which are mutations in the genome. Almost everything else is in the world of what we call epigenetics, and the environment is the main precursor to that. Asthma is a disease phenotype, which means what does it look like? It is highly susceptible to whatever your genotype is and how that genotype is turned on or off by the environment. What is the environment? Is anything at all that affects how you think or feel or act. It can be food, It can be stress. It can be bad air. It can be almost anything outside of the world that affects you can have an effect on your genome. We just don't know all the answers yet, but I'm going to show you some of the ones we do know. It is programmable in early life. This is a Venn diagram I pulled off the internet that shows what is the current dogma right now. You have a genome. That genome is your book of life, and you have all of these genes sitting there waiting to be turned on or off. You have environmental factors, you have age predilection, you have proteins that turn on or off the immune system, and you have exposure to infections, allergens, pollutants. They are combined to somehow form what we know as asthma and allergies. Now I'm going to go back to Dr. Peden's work, ozone. Good up high, bad nearby. We need ozone. Everybody knows all about ozone from hearing literature on TV or now with the World Wide Web. Ozone is produced in the upper atmosphere when UV rays hit oxygen, split them, add other oxygens to it, and you end up with O3 up here and it floats around. It's a good thing. It protects us. It acts as a barrier around the globe. Prevents bad radiation coming from our ever necessary sun from causing damage to us. Unfortunately now, we know there's holes in the ozone. What causes those holes? Pollution. We know this too. You see it everywhere. Let's take CFCs, a chemical that we used to use in inhalers. Here we are giving a medicine to humans to fix the asthma problem, but we're actually worsening the asthma problem by releasing this chemical in the atmosphere. Amazing. Ironic. CFC has a chloride bond in it. UV radiation, the sun hits that chloride bond, breaks it. That chloride bond then comes over and sees O3, ozone, breaks it into, and this is the upper atmosphere, by the way, breaks it into oxygen and a chloride with an oxygen molecule. So now you've just lost ozone, you've replaced it with oxygen. So now that protective barrier we hear about in the atmosphere is gone. Chloride can come again and do this damage repeatedly. CFCs are now banned. All albuterol inhalers and Xopenex inhalers are HFAs now because we learned this data. Again, good up high, bad nearby. Sunlight, once again, affects pollutants in our local atmosphere, volatile organic compounds, nitrogen oxides. Sun hits them, they combine, they form ozone in the lower atmosphere. Not so good. Okay, in the upper atmosphere, we love it. Lower atmosphere, not so much. They bake together, and that's what we end up with the sun. Well, those pollutants, do the particulates in the air seem large today? Some days it feels like that. Those pollutants are directly affecting our lungs, and I'm going to show you Dr. Peden's work from when he was here a few months back. Air quality index, everybody sees this now. Today's an orange day, today's a red day. It is really sad to me that when I grew up in northern New York, we didn't ever talk about going outside or not. My mom rang a cowbell for us to come home for lunch, breakfast, and dinner, and that was it. Other than that, my butt was outside, rain, snow, sleet, didn't matter. Nowadays, we have to worry if the kids can even go outside. How sad is that? Purple days, red days, orange days. This is a direct effect of what's happening in our environment. And everyone, you know, we could talk of politics, all that stuff, it really doesn't matter. The bottom line is we need to do something about this, and it should have been done 20 years ago, and we're sitting wrangling over who's getting elected, who's doing this. It's a travesty. Ozone season preview. John said appropriately, 16th worst air. Here's Charlotte. This is a picture of 10-year average, 2005, 2006 data. Look at that. There's Charlotte, high spikes. Not as bad as some others, but boy, I don't want that air in my lungs if I can help it. It actually, the bad air actually affects good lungs too. General facts. Asthma exacerbations generally follow pollutant exposure by 24 to 48 hours. Not always. If you get a really bad smoke inhalation from a fire, you can attack right there. But in general, 1 to 2 days after a real big exacerbation will occur after having exposure. Often exacerbations are occurring in pollutant exposures less than the data that we think is a problem. And this is straight from Dr. Peden's lecture. We know this. We always set these bars, say, oh, if it's above this, you're in trouble. Below this, it's not. Not anymore. We know this with lead data in children. Before it used to be, oh, if it's less than 10, you're fine. You can have that much lead in your body. It's garbage. Any amount of lead will hurt the brain. And we know this, and it's coming more and more and more in the data. Any amount of anything is not good for us. This is going to be a big one. Pollutants don't cause asthma. They make us more susceptible to things that make asthma worse. Here's the UNC data. This is a graph looking at how many asthma admissions people had versus their exposure to ozone. The higher exposure to particulates in the air, the more asthma admissions. Direct correlation epidemiology. You get exposed to this, you're going in the hospital. Bad idea. Now we're going to get into some stuff I'm going to bore you with terribly tonight, and that's looking at immune function and what happens inflammation-wise in your body and why this actually happens. We now understand the science. Before it was, you get exposed to smoke, you wheeze, here's some medicine, have a nice day. Now we're starting to understand the real data behind it. These are called polymorphonuclear cells. These are white blood cells. These are eosinophils, which is another white blood cell that is related to asthma and allergies. You get exposed to 0.16 parts per million of ozone, very low amount. Look at the increase in these inflammatory cells. These are cells that are normally in our body to fight off infection. Their job is to deal with bad pathogens. They're increasing because they don't understand what these chemicals are. They're like, this is not good, I don't want them here, so they go and try and kill them. Well, in the process of trying to kill them, what do they kill? The lung. Remember that mucus in the airway? These guys are making it. Here's another one. Ozone enhances markers of innate immunity, antigen presentation of airway monocytes in healthy people. So this is normal people. We're not even talking about sick lungs right now. Here you go, monocytes. These are markers of cells. These are called CD cells on white blood cells. Every single one of these people had increased inflammatory cells in their lungs after exposure to chemicals. So it doesn't matter what your lung status is, you're going to have problems over time with exposure to these things. Ozone enhances response to inhaled allergens. Ozone exposures cause increased immediate allergic responses to house dust mite. Okay? The house dust mite, which is a little critter that we can't see, sits in everyone's home. If you don't get exposed to as much ozone, you won't produce the types of cells that are necessary for you to get irritated by the house dust mite. So everything is synergistic. One of the things Dr. Wild taught me well during my training is nothing is isolated. If you have an endocrine disease, it's not just affecting the endocrine system. You're affecting other parts of your body all the time. Same thing with the environment. It's not just going to affect the lungs. There's going to be downstream effects to almost everything we're exposed to on every day. And we see this now. Ozone causes increasing eosinophils, and this is demonstrated at low doses. Dr. Peden said, all cohorts experience similar decreases in lung function immediately following ozone exposure. So don't care who your lungs are, what they are, you're going to have decreased lung function immediately afterwards. It's the asthmatics that have the sustained loss, but everyone gets irritated. I like this analogy, surface area exposed to the outside world. Everyone sees their skin. We got a lot of skin. We always think that's the biggest of everything in our body as far as organs go. Look at how big the lung surface area is, and this is in meters squared. So there's your skin, which we see a lot. That's how much lung surface area you have. Unbelievable amounts because of all the alveoli. Look at the gastrointestinal tract. 36 feet long in the average human, spread out with all these microvilli. That entire exposure right there is environmental. You touch something, that's your environmental exposure just by your finger. Imagine how much air exposure you can get to these particulates, and then stomach exposure you can get to eating food that's not so good for you. And I use the analogy of Lake Norman to Lake Tahoe because Lake Tahoe is essentially a huge lake if you look on a map. But actually the surface area of Lake Tahoe is smaller than the surface area of Lake Norman because Lake Norman has so many fingers. So you can get way more boats and pollute Lake Norman much faster than you can. And I live near Lake Norman, so I watch it. It's crazy. Dr. Peden's summary, UNC. Asthmatics have increased ozone-induced secretion of IL-1B. IL-1B is a major pro-inflammatory protein. In children, there's a disease called cryopyrin-associated periodic fever syndrome. It is a disease that they're born with, that this protein right here is overexpressed. And these children are born with diseases of type 1 diabetes, bullous pemphigoid, where their skin gets all messed up, all kinds of dyscrasias of the immune system, and they die within 6 months if they're not treated. That's in the extreme example. Let's look at that in a mild example. Increased inflammation, increased disease. Decreased expression of IL-10. This is a protective cytokine. This one actually is produced by cells when you want to regulate bad inflammation, shut it off. Now we know that ozone messes that up. Both sides are switched, going in the wrong direction. Not seen in atopic non-asthmatic. So if you're allergic but you don't have asthma, we don't see this change occur. The ozone irritates you, but it doesn't cause this morphologic change to the immune system. Asthmatics but not asthmatics also have increased expression of toll-like receptor 4. TLR4, I'm going to talk to you guys a little bit, it's called a pattern recognition receptor. It is set up by the old system from millennia ago that if you run into a bacterium, this little protein says, I know what this guy is and I need to kill him. It's before you teach the immune system how to be smart. It is stupid. And it just says, I see this guy, I don't like him, kill him. This pattern recognition receptor gets turned on extra, and I'm going to explain why that's a big problem down the road. Ozone increases response to allergens, and low levels of ozone cause problems. That was his summary. Now I'm going to move on to my part of the talk. Moral. Better off not having asthma to start. That's easy. We all know that. It's better off not having any disease to start. I have this thing I was taught by Dr. Weil as well. We want to have what's called compressed mortality. You want to live, drop dead. Perfect. instead of live, cancer, diabetes, all these other problems that go on. We don't want that. So how do we stop these diseases from starting? Genetics, they're there. We want to keep our DNA safe. Our DNA is the book of life. It's a blueprint for everything you need. Any protein you need to make in your body, your DNA is there for it. Watson and Crick showed us the DNA helix, all that. Bottom line is you want to keep that safe. I'm going to show you what's going wrong with that process. Normal immune function is key. We're messing that up. Avoidance of bad things is key. We're messing that up. So we're in the environment place. This is a center for the environment. It is the environment, stupid. The bottom line is everywhere we turn, we're screwing this environment up. You name something, I'll show you how we keep messing it up. Bisphenol A, I talked about it the last lecture, plastic that we put in baby bottles that's directly affecting the endocrine system to cause disease. Stupid. What is it, 80-something thousand now is the count of chemicals in our environment not tested in children and humans. Anyone ever seen the data from the Environmental Working Group on the 10 newborns that they tested their cord blood and found this ridiculous amount of chemicals in these babies in volumes enough to cause disease? Crazy. Cellular function is key. I was taught once that the nucleus is the answer to all your cell's problems. You pull the nucleus out, you kill the cell. Wrong. You pull a nucleus out of the cell continues to live until it needs to repair a protein, and then it doesn't have the book of life to do it. The cell membrane is the key to everything that happens in the cell because it is exposed to the outside environment. Anything that the cell gets exposed to teaches the cell what to do. If you take a primordial stem cell, the one that makes any cell in our body turn into something, and you take that exact same cell and you put it in a broth that promotes lung versus a broth that promotes heart versus a broth that promotes skin, it will do all those things. It doesn't matter what you do to the nucleus. That's the key. Environment, environment, environment. I'm going to drill that home tonight. Anyone here of the agouti mouse? If any of you have been to my lecture before, the agouti mouse is the poster child of what we used to think was right and now is wrong. We were taught at one time that Mendelian genetics was the answer. Mom and dad gave you genes, that's what you got, you're stuck. Wrong. It's not true. This is our DNA, okay? Starts as a chromosome, wrapped up, you have these little proteins called histones. These proteins keep the DNA locked in a safe. Think of it as a safe of your book of life. You don't want that book of life to get touched unless you want it to. These little proteins protect that. They have these methyl groups. These are little chemicals that we get in our food. These chemicals help that DNA stay safe. This agouti mouse is bred genetically by the old school method that we know to be fat, yellow, and diabetic every single time. You let mama mouse and mama mouse and daddy mouse get together, they produce a fat, yellow, diabetic mouse. Well, these researchers, this gentleman wonderfully will probably win the Nobel Prize for this, Randy Girdle at Duke, said, let's see what happens when we give these mice methylators. So he gave the mice mama, when they're pregnant, extra methylators, and the methylators are foods. Folic acid, B12, choline, betaine, these are things you get from average everyday foods. And what happened was when they gave all those things, that mouse became brown, skinny, and non-diabetic. So for the first time, we proved that the book of life didn't change. What we did was we read the book of life differently. And the reason we read it differently was because we gave these mice things that we should be eating all day long. I preach in my clinic every single day. Food is the key to everything. Hippocrates knew this millions of years ago, however many years ago he lived. That food was the answer. And we are spending all of our time killing ourselves with bad food. Randy Girdle's now given us the tools to teach people. Now I can sit here and teach everybody. You can see that and you can understand this without conceptualizing all the signs of genetics. This is what DNA looks like when we mess it up. It opens up because these little things on here called methylators are not there and acetylators come on. When it's looking the way it's supposed to, it's held in this position with these special proteins holding it tight. Transcription doesn't occur. You don't read the bad genes. This is what the agouti mouse taught us. Look at how many things can affect silencing of your genome. RNA, these are things floating in our system. Proteins, methylators from food. There's a million things. This is just the beginning of the puzzle. There are many, many ways to turn your genes on and off, and what we want to do is turn the right genes on and the wrong genes off. And the process over the next 15 to a million years is going to be proving what turns the right things on and right things off. Hopefully someday we'll get to Star Trek and you turn the wrong gene on, you zap something to you and it sends something in, it turns the right gene back on and you're done. Hopefully. Hygiene hypothesis. I taught this when I was teaching asthma 10 years ago when I worked for one of the drug companies, which I don't do much anymore, thankfully. I taught the hygiene hypothesis to folks. This is a system of discussion where these guys started figuring out, why are these babies having disease? What's going wrong? They started looking at this, and they did epidemiology studies. Let's just look at populations and see what happens. They compared in France, farm versus city living. Same genetic people, same environment. The only difference is some kids lived on farms, some didn't. What happened? The kids who lived on farms didn't develop asthma and allergies because they had a decrease in this thing called IgE, which is the major antibody floating around the body that causes disease. What was it? Well, I'm going to show you that in a minute. Reunification of East and West Germany taught us something amazing. Historically, we thought that pollutants were really, really bad for asthma. But I just showed you, pollutants don't cause asthma. They just make it worse. So they reunified East and West Germany, and they went over to East Germany with all their fancy doctors and said, oh, we're going to find tons of asthma. They found less asthma. But when the West Germans went to live in East Germany, their asthma got worse. Why? Because they lived in dirtier environments. Environments that had exposure to normal bacteria, normal things that God expected us to do. Every single baby at 6 months of age does what? Licks everything. Toes in the mouth, fingers in the bottom, in the mouth, you name it. Dog comes over. Why? That's God's way of teaching immune tolerance. It's teaching the system right from wrong. We stop that. We Purell everything. I tell every mother, stop Purelling stuff unless the kid really, truly puked on it. Fine, clean it up a little bit. Other than that, it's insane. Study of 100 infants with atopic disease. At 18 months, less intestinal biodiversity than at 1 week of life. And I'm going to get into intestinal biodiversity, getting back to that big thing that we talked about earlier with all that GI surface area. This is fascinating. Norbiton, up in Scandinavia, a place where nobody goes. There's just a few people. It's freezing, freezing, freezing. Nobody wants to be up there. They looked at children living there. They compared famine years to non-famine years. And they found that the kids that lived there during famine years had an average of 6 years longer life expectancy than if they didn't. And this is stuff you'll read about in books like The Blue Zones and different things like Mehmet Oz talks about on TV, that some mild starvation is actually better for the human genome. Excess food is actually bad for the human genome. This was one of these epigenetic phenomena, or these teaching the genome phenomenons we learn now. It was in Time magazine. If you want to read the article, it's in January 18th of this year. Fantastic article. This was amazing. So when they started the genome project, everyone said, okay, the human genome is so much more complex than a worm. It should have 100,000+ genes. The worm genome maybe has 5,000. Look what the human genome proved. 24,000 genes in the humans. Worm, 21,000. How is that possible? It's a tiny little worm, doesn't have much to do. We have all these things. I'll get up here and speak to you guys and not get stressed out and go crazy. How does that happen? It doesn't make any sense. Epigenetics. Every environmental experience that these cells have turns the genes on and off that we need for our cellular environment to flourish. The epigenetic marks on the fly genome or the worm genome are just smaller. Look at twin studies. I am unfortunately married to a woman who's a wonderful woman, not unfortunately in that part, but married to a wonderful woman whose father had a twin. Identical genome. They should end up with the same diseases. They didn't. One ended up with Alzheimer's, one ended up with heart disease, one died of Alzheimer's, one's still alive with heart disease. How is that possible? It's not. We always used to think nothing made sense. Now we understand it. It's environmental experiences. They had different experiences in their life, even living in the same environment, how they were treated, what foods they ate, you never know. Everything gets turned on differently. It's this cell membrane. It's the key to everything. Critical window. I've been teaching this for a while now. Moms and babies. Moms and babies, moms and babies, moms and babies. Moms drive healthcare. Why? Because they're smart. They know what needs to be done. Moms need to hear this stuff, and they're not hearing it in the right ways. I always talk to mothers about breastfeeding and eating nutritional stuff. I walk into the nursery and see a baby, go see mom. She's got, Prevacid running through the IV, and she's got McDonald's sitting on the countertop. Makes no sense, but that's what we're doing. This is in a recent article that just came out in Journal of Allergy and Clinical Immunology 1 month ago. Ho et al. Put in maternal exposure to chemicals and pollutants, viral infections, dust mites, nutritional factors during pregnancy increase asthma risk in offspring. It's not a question. It is definitive. We know this. Critical window number 2, infancy. Severe lower respiratory tract infections, airborne irritants, dust mites, paracetamol, which is basically acetaminophen, vitamin D deficiency, etc., increase asthma risk. Conversely, which we already talked about, animal exposure is good. You want to be exposed to those bacteria that are so nasty. This is my madness. This is what I do when I'm sitting around with nothing to do at home. Disease, morbidity, and death. This is what we want to avoid. You have some things that are determined, like genetically, like trisomy 21, but everything else is pretty much modifiable. Mind-body issues. Epigenetics can be hit by certain foods, gut dysbiosis, so different things are going wrong with our intestines. Stress, monster data now showing that asthmatic children who are exposed to stress have more asthma severity and higher steroid needs, everything else being equal. Purely stress, just mental anguish. Chemical exposure is a big one. All this stuff causes immune dysregulation, which makes the disease get worse. Dr. Peden showed us nicely that chemical exposures are sensitizing us to allergens. Homer knows this. You get exposed to bad chemicals, you're going to get worse. Early exposure is good. Innate. It is innate. We know this. What I put up innate here for? Because this is our immune system. There's two types of immune system. There's the innate immune system, the adaptive. The innate is the one that's there. It's there all the time, and it's not programmable. It's ready to roll no matter what you run into. It's set in stone. The other side of the immune system is the adaptive. That's the one that when it sees something, there's these cells that learn memory, and they teach the rest of the immune system to be ready the next time. That's why when you get sick with certain infections, you don't get sick a second time with them, because your adaptive immune system now learns, says, next time I see it, it's dead in seconds. Okay? It's set up to do with the environment, but specifically it's set up to do with pathogens. This entire thing is primarily there to deal with bugs. These toll-like receptors I'm going to talk about again. These are pattern recognition receptors. They are the things on the cells that are sitting there waiting for a certain type of protein to show up. Once it sees it, says, ooh, I know what you are, dead. And that's what you want it to do. Normal exposures equal tolerance. I repeat some stuff on purpose, just so those are the big take-home points, just so everyone knows why I'm repeating. Activation of these toll-like receptors. So hard science, I'm sorry, but I think this is really important. When you look at these things, toll-like receptor 4 is the big one for asthma and allergies, but all these things are on plants, humans, dogs, cats. We all have these, and they're set up to deal with bacteria, different fungi, different flagellate creatures, DNA. They all sit there, and it's the protein structure that allows the body to recognize it and kill it quickly. In Dr. Peden's lecture earlier, it said increase in toll-like receptor 4 from ozone. Okay? On the face of it, we think that's no big deal, but actually what it does, it sensitizes the body more to these things that shouldn't be sensitized to. Here's a picture out of the Journal of Allergy and Clinical Immunology, which shows these allergens. So this is stuff that we know, tobacco, smoke, pollen, grass, all of this stuff. And anytime it hits the airway epithelium, there's a cell there called the dendritic cell that says, okay, I know what you are, tastes it, and then it comes and it talks to the immune cells, the adaptive cells, and said, which way do we go? Is this a good thing or a bad thing? Should I expand and become a cell killer, or should I say, memory, no big deal, this is food, leave it alone? The system is set up to deal with it. This is where it's all going wrong. Th1 versus Th2. I'm going to try not to bore you with this. These are the two major different types of immune cells that learn memory. These are the ones that they want to go after. Viruses, bacteria, parasites, immune suppression. Okay? This is what it should be. It should be balanced. Th1 to Th2. Pregnancy, God did a very smart thing. He said, pregnancy is a baby that has half the DNA of dad and half the DNA of mom. If we allow it to be a Th1 type, which is the type that likes to kill viruses, it'll kill the fetus. And this is actually what happens when you abort a baby. If you have Turner syndrome and the body says this baby should not come to term, it'll switch the immune system from Th2 and say, you got to go to Th1 because we got to abort this child, and it kills it, and then you expel it. So the body knows to keep it as a Th2 type, which is the one that won't wipe out the baby. But then at birth, when that baby starts tasting everything, the body goes back into a balance. But if we stop allowing that tasting to happen, it stays Th2 in some babies. And if it stays Th2, that turns on asthma and allergies. Mom is Th2, we know that. Baby's Th nothing. It's all environmental signals that teach baby to be what. And we learn now that what happens to the gut flora from breastfeeding and C-sections is changing this stuff. And many other things. I'm going to just show you a few of them. This is the big crux of the problem. Hygiene hypothesis says that our environmental signals are messing up tolerance. It's messing up the body's ability to say, you're food, you're fine. You're dust mite, you're fine. You virus, you're dead. We're messing that all up. So now the body's saying, hey, you, dust mite, you're a virus. I need to kill you. So you keep getting exposed to dust mite. When you sleep and your pillow has dust mites in it, you wake up and you can't breathe. That's what we want to stop. The problem is stopping it now when it's already started is a lot harder than stopping it before it starts. Now we're going to talk about the gut. I just did a big lecture downtown at Presbyterian to the neonatologists to help them understand that they need to push harder to get moms to breastfeed, because we are destroying the guts of our children by giving them cow's milk. And everyone knows I'm not the best fan of cow's milk, but we're not going to go there tonight. Milk, cow or mom. Public parenting behavior versus breastfeeding. Which one comes under more attack? You know, this is what we hear about. I hear moms saying, I don't feel comfortable breastfeeding in public. Why? That's crazy. We should be applauding women to breastfeed in public. But instead, nobody's saying a word about the mom smacking the, out of her kid unless the DSS is nearby. And even then, who knows what happens. It has nothing to do with you, Bessie. I'm just lactose intolerant. Milk is for baby cows. The last time I checked, every one of us has a baby human. Can milk survive, keep your human alive? Absolutely. Do we need it if you can't breastfeed? Absolutely. But should that be the first choice? No way. And I'm a staunch person, and I truly believe this, and I come out very strong about this, and people get very frustrated, but the bottom line is the data's here. This is not in a vacuum. We're not teaching stuff that's just based on willy-nilly tree hugger beliefs. When some people say, oh, you're just, no, this is science, which unfortunately we have to use oftentimes to get the answers. I wish it was, when everyone does kumbaya and says this is the right thing, but it doesn't unfortunately have to go that way. Most people want hard data. The other one here says, I can take somebody on aisle 3. My wife and I had a beautiful baby girl, our second child, who had milk protein intolerance, so she couldn't tolerate my wife eating cheese. So my wife, unfortunately, poor thing, had to quit drinking milk and eating cheese for a while. At 8 months of age, her milk dried up. It was a sad thing. I had the choice of going on formula or what? Well, it turned out my wife's cousin had a baby 3 months before my daughter had to run out of milk, and she was a wet nurse of wet nurses. So we fed my daughter with the breast milk of her cousin. Worked perfectly. Sounds strange to some people, but boy, knowing the data, I'm glad I did it. This is going to be some data coming out. The American Academy of Pediatrics is finally catching up. Exclusive breastfeeding of at least 3 to 4 months is reducing the incidence of clinical asthma and atopic dermatitis and eczema to 27% in a low-risk population. That's a population that does not have genetic predisposition. Mom or dad don't have asthma, somebody close. 42% reduction in patients who have a risk of asthma. That's all it takes for a big reduction. You show me a drug that does something that good, that company's worth billions. And all we have to do is tell mom breastfeed. Where's the public outcry for this? The AAP statement actually, from what I understand, is now going to be that they're going to say that breastfeeding should not be a choice. It should be the first and only, and then bottle feeding should be secondary in cases where mom can't breastfeed. Now, it's impressive. I hope they pull it out. We'll see. Gut flora, okay? What influences, what intestinal bacteria sit there? Intestinal bacteria are important. They are necessary. You have 3 pounds of bacteria in your body at any one time. It's sort of scary to think. You have more foreign DNA in your body than you have your own. By I think it's a 10-fold difference. It's amazing. Gut flora influences. What makes your gut flora better? Breastfeeding, vaginal delivery, certain foods, fiber, farm living. What makes your gut flora not so good? Formula, cesarean section, antibiotic use, antacid use, high saturated fat diet, refined sugar diet. This is what we see now every day. This is what we should see every day. And I'm going to show you why that affects stuff. Maternal and child diet. This is a pyramid of the Mediterranean diet. Okay, it's a diet we should all be doing every day, but we don't. And you can see nice stuff here. The only one I'd say while you're pregnant don't do is that one. That's for me. I'm going to take an aside quickly because I think this is powerful. Anyone ever seen this before? This is a picture of omega-6 and omega-3 fatty acids. This is something that we ever hear about in the news. Oh, you need DHA, you need EPA, you need fish oil, you need fish. This is the data that I'm going to show you later. I'm going to go into more detail later, but right now what I want to show you is we spent the last 40 years producing drugs to stop this cascade of events. So you got COX-2 inhibitors, your Vioxx, Celebrex, you've got your aspirin, your NSAIDs like ibuprofen, you have steroids, Singulair. All of these drugs are used for asthma and allergies to stop the production of this guy right here, arachidonic acid, which is a big pro-inflammatory product that your body needs to survive, but we have way too much of it because we eat tons of omega-6s, okay? I'm going to go into more detail of that later, but who's talking about this? You see commercials all day long about this stuff because it makes money. It does help. It works. I use these drugs all the time. I wish I didn't have to. If I could get people to understand this a little more, wouldn't need to. Maternal Mediterranean diet is associated with less persistent wheeze and atopy at 6 years of age. So if mom just eats better, child less risk of disease. Maternal Mediterranean diet may protect against asthma in developing children. Cellular protection offered by increased levels of all these wonderful things our body needs from food. This is in children, not moms. Mediterranean diet again, 50,000 children, 8 to 12 years old. Conclusion, Mediterranean diet is associated with decreased wheeze and asthma, but not allergic sensitization. Maternal diet in pregnancy, Spain, 1997, studied 460 mother offspring dyads. High level adherence to Mediterranean diet, offspring at 6.5 years of age, reduced rate of atopy and asthma. And there's study after study after. You can go online and Google and you'll see a bazillion of these. Don't see this being taught in medical school. We're talking about what drugs to use. Low vitamin E associated with increased risk of asthma. Would I say take vitamin E as a supplement? No, and I'll show you why. Be careful. Norwegian mother-children cohort study, 32,000 children, maternal folic acid supplementation, increased wheeze at 18 months of age. You're not supposed to get lots of things in supplement form. If we need it, you're deficient in it, it makes sense. Otherwise, everything you need in for your human genome to flourish is outside in the environment in food. Just eat. Problem is people don't eat, so then we put it back in the food. Why is folic acid necessary for neural tube defects to get aborted in pregnant scenarios? Because moms just aren't eating folic acid. If you ate a Mediterranean diet, you wouldn't need the folic acid supplementation. We wouldn't need multivitamins. Tsunami. How about a mom who eats purely pro-inflammatory American food during pregnancy, takes Prevacid to help that diet because she's eating the bad food because she has reflux, delivers via C-section, receives antibiotics for Group B strep, is stressed out, and then uses cow-based formula the first year? Look at the epigenetic marks that just happened in this child's genome. Everything I just put up there are things that we know are not good. I can tell you where the genome is showing those marks getting switched. At Rowan, I had some SSRIs in because a lot of these poor moms are depressed. We don't know what SSRIs do, although we know it messes with serotonin, and I know serotonin, 80% of it's in your gut. Only 20% is up here. We know what it does up here. We have no idea what it does down here. Scary. Blue Zones for Mothers. Everyone ever read the book Blue Zones? If you haven't, you should. It's a book by Dan Buettner. He's a National Geographic gentleman who wrote this book after doing some travels. And he found that the people who lived to 100 years of age and lived healthy to 100 had these things in common. Eating a prominent plant-based diet, all natural food. Sense of community, purpose in life, daily exercise, eat 20% less, spiritual practice, slow down, work less, and rest more. I do all the above except for that one. My zones. All the above with avoid chemicals. Environment, environment, environment. Go to ewga.org. He was a speaker here. Ken Cook, fantastic lecture. Great website. Learn what you can. They have a lot of information on there. Chemicals are a huge, huge, huge problem. The government's not doing their job, and they probably won't for a long time. Do the best you can. Natural environmental exposure. Let your kids lick stuff. You know, if you're older, lick stuff. You know, I don't care. Do it. It makes a lot of sense. Let your system learn. Sense of community, purpose in life. Judicious sun exposure. This is huge. Everyone's vitamin D deficient everywhere you turn. Why? It shouldn't be that way. But we're indoors all day long. We're afraid to go outside because the weather's bad. We wear sunscreens on our face because we have these beautiful complexes we're trying to preserve till we're 90. Don't. Get sun. Get your natural way that God expected you to get vitamin D. If you don't have vitamin D, there's 900 nuclear proteins that aren't produced appropriately. Those 900 nuclear proteins are going to affect your book of life. Don't let it happen. Get outside in the sun. I tell all of my staff every day at lunchtime, go for a walk. In utero effects. In utero exposed to smoke. Ooh, that was very nicely said. In utero smoke exposure, decreased response to inhaled steroids in children with asthma. So if mom smokes, that kid doesn't respond to the steroids as well. That's sad. So we've got to put more steroids in the system, and then it affects their endocrine system. Not good. It's an epigenetic phenomenon. We know this. It changes the DNA methylation promoter regions. That stuff I was showing you on that genome, where the methylation stuff was, it directly turns on the read, not read signals that we don't want. This is just cigarettes. How scary. Scheme. Maternal allergen exposure, priming of these TH cells that tell the baby's body which way to go. You get environmental exposures here, and bang. Bronchial hyperresponsiveness, asthma. That's the paradigm. That's what we need to stop. We're spending all of our time treating everything right here. We're trying to get some of these viruses under control. We're trying to deal with a little bit of the bacteria. Where we need to be is right here. We're way too far in the front end of this game. We need to be all the way back here, priming the system. And that's why I'm boring you with this immunity stuff, because if I just talk about a normal asthma lecture and tell you, oh, here, avoid dust mites, and I'm not teaching you what you need to know. asthma. It's a glass of water, okay? If you're a wheezer, you know what makes you wheeze. What I want to do is I want you to decrease the level of each one of those wheezing things so you're starting from about that much water. Wheezing is when you get too much water and it spills out. If I can get you to get rid of dust mites or get rid of some of the bad gut flora that you have that are irritating your body or get rid of some other exposure to mold, I can decrease all the water in your body to the point where you don't need drugs anymore. Wouldn't that be novel? But the only way to do it is if patients take compliance lessons and learn to do what we tell them. It's hard. I have patients every day. I tell them what to do. The next time they come back, they've done the opposite. Gain 10 pounds, nothing, and they say, why isn't my drugs working? Well, I tell you why. Are you going to listen? Article after article. Eating 3 or more burgers a week boosts a child's risk of developing asthma and wheeze. Thorax. Burgers. What does it have to do with the red meat? I don't think it's the red meat. I think that's a marker of what other crap they're eating. And it's the food that's affecting their inflammation. It's a food that's affecting that arachidonic acid thing I showed you on that omega-6 pathway. If we can get them to learn that eating poor food is bad, we got to change. Now we've got a chance. And I've got kids in my clinic that have bought in hook, line, and sinker, and I'm getting them off their drugs every week. And it's beautiful. The sad thing is they're not the rule, they're the exception, because that takes parenting, and parenting is a sorely missed product right now. Mayo Clinic, Dr. James T. Lee puts in here, foods may play some role. Eat plenty of fruits and vegetables. I like what he put there. These are good in advice here. Food additives, such as sulfites, can trigger asthma symptoms. Who has migraines? Everyone knows sulfites can trigger migraines. Why are they in our foods? How many people are going to need to get sick before we start saying, let's get this junk out? Food dyes in America are everywhere. In Europe, if you need a red dye in a food, what do they put in it? Anyone know? Paprika. Wow, what a novel idea. Use paprika instead of red dye number 5. You know, you need yellow, you put in lemon peel. What is wrong with us? I mean, you know, it's unfathomable that this is how we see the world. Being overweight can worsen asthma symptoms. Food will not cure your asthma. True. It will not change your book of life, but it will change how you read it. Okay? Does everyone understand that part? Because I think that's the key to everything I'm trying to teach you tonight. Inflammation. Immunologically mediated process. Heal, repair the body. You need inflammation. You stub your toe, it gets red and swollen for a reason. Because the body says, ouch, that hurts, I need to repair, send in all these chemicals, fix the bones, you're good to go. Provides protection from infection. If you can't inflame, you can't kill off that bacterium. And that bacterium takes over and you're a dead man, or woman, or child. Excess inflammation is the reason we're dropping dead of all these diseases. There's too much inflammation in the body. You name the disease, I'll show you how it's inflammation. New guys are now saying Alzheimer's, brain on fire, is what they call it. It's not just amyloid plaques and all this stuff about the brain getting clogged up. It's inflammation. Heart disease used to be said, oh, it's just cholesterol sitting there. Garbage. Cholesterol is the body trying to plug holes in the intima of the artery because of all the inflammation. And then a plaque builds up on it because that fat ruptures, and the next thing you know, it's a big plug and you have a heart attack. The root cause is not cholesterol, but that's what everyone will tell you. Because if you get your Zetia or you get your, I don't even like the drugs, I can't even remember them anymore, Lipitor, all of a sudden you're better, you're not going to drop dead. Why talk about the fact that if you just changed your diet, you wouldn't need any of this stuff in the first place? Every disease has a treatment through food. Here's an interesting one. Inflammation. High-fat meal induces low-grade endotoxemia. Everyone heard of the word sepsis? You get a really bad infection, you drop dead. That's endotoxemia. We're talking about low-level endotoxemia. If you get exposed to certain foods, they increase certain bacteria in your gut. These bacteria are called gram-negative rods. And when these gram-negative rods die, which they do all the time, 3 pounds of bacteria in your gut, they release something called lipopolysaccharide. It's a fat sugar molecule. That fat sugar molecule gets seen by that thing I told you before, that toll-like receptor, that pattern recognition receptor, because it thinks this is some primordial bad bug. This is just from food. Increased risk of coronary artery disease. That's why people drop dead after heart attacks after eating a big fat meal. The 2 most common reasons someone shows up in the ER from a heart attack is bad fat meal, bad stressful event. Here's why you got your bad fat meal. Increases inflammatory cytokines. It releases these proteins into the system that cause you to get inflammation. And if you just have to show me the right disease, I'll show you how you're going to die from it. Then they learned that red wine and olive oil stop this. How novel. We know this from the Lyon hypothesis. The French drink red wine and eat cheese all day long, and they outlive Americans. They did this one, I don't know if you've ever seen that cartoon going around. The Japanese, eat, sushi and mushrooms and sake, and they're living longer than us. The French eat red wine and cheese. The Germans are eating beers and brats. They're all living longer than us. The problem is we're just American. It's not just that. It's what we do every day. It's that blue zone stuff. It's all the other stuff these cultures are doing to allow all those environmental signals to their book of life to turn it on and off. We keep focusing on one thing. It's a global picture. Look at the whole paradigm and you'll understand how to fix yourself. Childhood obesity epidemic. Come to my clinic. It's scary. In 11 years, we've developed a diabetes clinic. 11 years ago, Dr. Hudson and I, almost maybe one patient in the first 3 years had diabetes, type 2. Not the type 1 type. This is the one that adults get. Now she runs a clinic for obese kids with diabetes. It's that fast changing. Okay, and it's not just food, this is chemicals. But here, look at this. Fruits and vegetables have gotten more expensive since 1985. Okay? What hasn't? 2-liter bottle of Coke, 99 cents today, was 99 cents 20 years ago. It's your good government subsidizing the production of corn syrup, which subsidizes the production of your soda. They won't help us subsidize the stuff that keeps our kids healthy. Yet I fight for our local school system to get healthy food for the kids. I'm out there stealing from Peter to give to Paul with, baked ziti. Why won't these guys just stop giving farmers money to produce corn and give them money to produce red bell peppers? Then all of a sudden the school can afford red bell peppers with their $1.40 per kid's meal. Crazy. U.S. food consumption. 10.6% of vegetables, fruits, nuts, and beans is what's consumed in the year 2000 by us, Americans on average. This is all the things that turn your genome on and off. The good stuff. Down here is the stuff that turns the genome in the wrong way. Fats and oils, sugars and sweets. That's what we're doing to ourselves.
Bye-bye, boys!
Have fun storming the castle!
Think it'll work?
It would take a miracle.
Anyone know that movie? I'll give you $1 at the end. Princess Bride. This is great. I love this cartoon. I do feel a lot better since we switched to trans fat-free oil. It's not about that. It should be about nature. We wouldn't have trans fats if we didn't screw with our fats. You wouldn't need them. They're not there. We know they're bad. Now you hear about trans fat-free this, trans fat-free that. We should have never had them. I went to Walmart once and it said on the front, no high fructose corn syrup. I was like, sweet. My wife is a nutritionist. She's like, oh my gosh. She's more skeptical. She goes, I got to put something bad in there. And she was right. Turned it around. High maltose corn syrup. But the average person's like, oh, this is what I need. Not good. Here's another study, saturated fat. High saturated fat diets. They took mice. They had a sterile gut, which meant no bacteria in the intestines. They had a gut with the intestine that had a lot of these gram-negative rods, like the baby I showed you with all those problems at birth with the wrong food, the wrong delivery system, all that. And then they had one that had good gut bacteria, lactobacillus bifidobacter, all the ones we want from breastfeeding and vaginal delivery. And they said, what happens when they ate a high saturated fat diet? The sterile gut, nothing happened, because the bacteria had no influence on what the fats did. The good gut, no disease, no increased inflammation. The gram-negative rod gut, increased CD14, which is one of those white blood cell markers that turns on inflammation, and then you end up with downstream effects on insulin and fat deposition. So basically it's metabolic syndrome. This is one of the links now to proving metabolic syndrome. Saturated fat's a part of it. It's not just sugar. All this stuff is linked. Polyunsaturated fat. Now we're going to switch in quickly, and I'm almost finished. We're going to switch in quickly to the discussion on those bad fats. PUFAs, what we call polyunsaturated fats, are the good fats that we find in certain foods, and then there's some bad fats we find in certain foods. And I'm going to show you which ones cause problem. Historically, the ratio of polyunsaturated fats was around 3-to-1, which is the 6s to the 1s. The 6s are theoretically the bad ones, although you need them, and the 3s are the 1. Okay, that was the old ratio. Now it's about 30-to-1, which means the 6s went up by a fold of 10. Okay? This is what went wrong. You increase the 6 by a fold of 10, these enzymes share the same process. Anyone understands chemistry, simply, what ends up happening is because you saturated these enzymes with this side, you produce more of the inflammatory mediator arachidonic acid. You don't have enough omega-3s. You don't get enough of DHA. Where is that? DHA and EPA. DHA is necessary for brain function. EPA is necessary for immune function. All of a sudden, you've skewed your system so bad, now you just end up with disease. Big question about prostaglandins are something related to pregnancy and delivery. Is all this bad food actually messing with why mom's going to preterm labor? There's data now showing that women who eat healthier have less preterm labor, have less preterm births. It's all there. It's just coming out in the literature, and we're not getting it to patients fast enough. So my goal is decrease this, increase this. Flaxseed, leafy green vegetables, predominantly fish, especially oily fish, cold water fish. Decrease this. Animals that are fed grain. Name me a cow that ate grain 1,000 years ago. They didn't. They ate grass. They had 4 stomachs. Now we feed them grain to marbleize their meat so it's so lovely and tasty. Well, that grain now is made from these omega-6 products. So now meat went from being a good, healthy source of food for us to a bad source of food, unless you get it grass-fed. Then it goes back to being more omega-3 because it's grass. They eat so much grass, they turn omega-3. Fish eat plankton, omega-3, okay? Nature, just go back to what God intended. If we start doing that, everything changes back to normal. We don't do that. We like our marbled meats. Sorry, I'm running through this again because it's on there. Let's look at the fats. Flaxseed oil, high omega-3 content. Not too much omega-6, some saturated, but not bad. Here's the ones we put in all of our foods. Safflower, sunflower, corn oil, soybean oil, lots of omega-6s. Very little bitty omega-3s. All the fried food, everywhere you turn. This is what you're adding to your system. That's that precursor to the bad stuff. What we need to do is give more people flaxseed oil. Canola oil is a good one because it's got omega-3s, but it doesn't have a lot of the O6s. The ratio is 2 to 1. It's a good ratio. Monounsaturated fats are excellent for you. Olive oil, the other great one. Then these guys down here cause problems because it's that saturated fat. That's when you get into that gram-negative rod stuff again, the gut flora. What color's your plate? Okay? Food should be colorful, because if it's colorful, that means it's got all the things in it that helps your book of life do what it's supposed to do. Here's Dr. Weil's anti-inflammatory diet. This is his recommendation for what we should be eating every day. Lots of vegetables and fruits, beans, legumes, some pasta, whole grains, healthy fats, fish, whole soy, cooked Asian mushrooms, other sources of protein, healthy herbs and spices, a little bit of tea, some healthy sweets, some red wine, and some supplements. Some people would differ with the supplements part. Everything else on here is undisputable. This is what we all should be doing. I hand out a handout on that diet to every single asthma patient I see, and I pray that they're going to do it. Vast majority have a hard time because a lot of moms don't even know how to cook anymore. That's another dead art with sewing. Steps to AI eating. Reduce the amount of saturated fats. We talked about that. Reduce omega-6 fats. Increase omega-3 fats. Use a whole foods approach. There are a million books out there on whole foods. Anybody who's read The Omnivore's Dilemma, The Food Eater's Manifesto, that's all you need. You read those, and if you learn that, that's all you need to survive in this world now. I'm going to end with 2 things. One, this is what we need. If people start doing this, we will start a change, because that's getting to the epigenetics. We will stop the kids from starting the disease in the first place. Then we won't need to treat them all day long, and I'll put myself out of business and I can go retire. My wife will go to work. Last and not least, this is just what I threw this in because this is cutting edge literature that just came out. This is fascinating. GGT, this is a enzyme that our body has that's predominantly in your liver, and it is elevated if you have cirrhosis from alcohol, any kind of liver disease. And we always thought that was the only thing it was necessary for. Well, Ducky Lee and this guy David Jacobs did some brilliant research. After the Vietnam War, they realized that this exfoliating of the jungle with dioxin, otherwise known as Agent Orange, to see the Viet Cong, was having some effect on the humans over there. This is a population of people who eat vegetables and fruits, walk everywhere, work hard, should not have type 2 diabetes. Their rate of type 2 diabetes went like this after the Vietnam War. People started researching what happened. Well, it turned out that now they've done a follow-up study and started learning that if you are obese, and you take 1,000 obese people in the United States and you compare them all, if they have an elevated GGT in the upper quartile of normal, it's still in the normal range, but it's high normal, their risk of developing type 2 diabetes is, I think it's to the tune of 400% higher than if you're in the lowest quartile of normal. And why that is amazing. And I'll try and show you in a very scary diagram. GGT is right here, it's gamma-glutyl transpeptidase. It's this enzyme that takes this thing called glutathione. If you take Tylenol and you try and die from it, we will bring you to the hospital and give you something called N-acetylcysteine. It is a medicine that gives a precursor to produce glutathione. And then if you produce lots of glutathione, you will take the acetaminophen, bind it, and kick it out of your body by urine. You'll save your life. Well, any chemical you put in your body, whether it's a pesticide, whether it's a herbicide, a fungicide, don't care what it is, this baby right here is what's going to take it out of the system. If you don't have enough of this, what happens? Epigenetic changes. You start to change your book of life. You read it the wrong way. GGT goes up because you need to take glutathione, break it into its parts, and bring it into the cell, and then you conjugate whatever chemical you want, and you pee it out. Excreted means to pee it out. So these guys learn now that if you take humans and you look at their exposure to chemicals, now we know physiologically that those chemicals are killing the body. And we're learning this through epidemiology and now science. We're finally catching up with our stupidity. It's sort of the way I like to say it. Our science is finally catching up with all the bad things we've been doing for a long time. And now it's our chance, because we have the science, to say, now let's just trust in what God has told us to do forever. And we have the science now to prove it. Go back to nature every single way you can. Every mom I try and see, I tell them, get chemicals out of your house. Don't spray. Because if you spray, where does it end up? Take a beam of light that shines in your window and watch what the dust does. Spray water into it. Where does it all go? Whoosh, 6 feet in every direction. Now that settles on the kid's toy. And what does the kid do with his toy? Lick the chemicals. Genome changes. That's the end.